Hello and welcome to this Philbert Flies early access preview of Origami Studios Gatwick Airport scenery for Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this video, I'll be showing you around a pre-release version of the airport in different weather and lighting conditions, giving you my opinion on it and also comparing it to MKVY's freeware version, which I know many of us have had many hours of enjoyment from. I'll be trying to answer the question on everyone's lips: is it worth spending money on a payware Gatwick when we have such a good freeware one? But that's all to look forward to. For now, you get to watch me fly the traditional approach, in this case to runway 26 left. Enjoy the beautiful Sussex countryside and maybe get a little feel for the performance of the scenery on my computer. You can find my system specs and graphics settings in the video description down below. On the subject of performance, I know a lot of people have found MKVY's Gatwick to have a big performance impact. I personally haven't. I get the odd stutter, but I get the odd stutter all over the world, and I haven't noticed any great difference in the performance of the two versions of Gatwick we're going to be talking about today. So unfortunately that's one aspect of your decision making that I can't help with, I'm afraid. That said, sit back, relax, enjoy the landing, and I'll speak to you again on the ground.
$500. $400. $300. $200. $100. $50. $40. $30. $20. $10. $5.
Welcome to stand 567 at Gatwick. We're going to start by having a look at the jetway connecting to the aircraft. And that has done a fantastic job. No gap between the jetway and the aircraft, and the hood doesn't go through the aircraft's skin. Let's move on to having a look at some modelling and texturing, starting with the jetway itself. Now this is a really nice custom model with a good amount of weathering, accurate texturing, and the textures are really pretty crisp as well. The stand we parked up at is on Pier 5 of the North Terminal, so this seems as good a place as any to begin our tour of the airport. The modelling is done to a pretty high standard. You'll notice that we have quite a lot of detail down at ground level, and all of the structures out the front of the pier have been accurately recreated. There are a few jagged edges here and there, as you will notice particularly on these round buildings. It's kind of unfortunate that they've got this red line around them, or you probably wouldn't have noticed. And indeed, as you're going about your day-to-day business at Gatwick, you're probably not going to notice this. The quality of the textures is okay. They are a little bit blurry in places. They're certainly not the sharpest we've ever seen. However, there are some real shining examples of quality texturing, not least these advertising hoardings, which are super sharp and easy to read. The terminal buildings at Gatwick do not feature transparent glass or modelled interiors. Now, this is something that I've become accustomed to in recent airport releases. It's quite rare now to see opaque window textures. But the ones they've used here are really very good in my opinion. They do create the impression of a terminal interior. The quality is good and they are pretty crisp. When you get up close, obviously there is a little bit of blurriness, but nothing you'd notice from an aircraft cockpit perspective. And we do have PBR materials used which create very realistic looking reflections. The terminal roofs have a reasonable amount of detail. You'll notice we've got these skylights here and some little pipe things over here. I'm not entirely sure what these are, but it's nice to see a bit of detail included. The roof textures are not particularly high resolution, but they're on a roof and you're not going to get very close to them, so this doesn't bother me in the slightest. Continuing south across the airport, we come to the famous bridge which connects the main part of the North Terminal with Pier 6. Now this does feature some transparent glass which has been nicely tinted, and it looks very good indeed. Moving inside, you'll notice that there is a little bit of interior detailing, at least in terms of the ground textures. But it's sad to see that the glass loses its tint from the inside, making this not quite as good a spot for plane spotting as it might have been. Pier 6 itself has been done to the same high standard as Pier 5. Excellent quality modelling, texturing mostly very good, unless you get really close, in which case you will notice a little bit of blurriness. This is Pier 4, which looks very nice indeed. The textures are nicely weathered, and the attention to detail is impressive as well. I'm really impressed by these lighter coloured tiles, which presumably have been replaced over the years. I'm not entirely sure. Again, the texture resolution is plenty good enough for normal day-to-day operations, and it's only when you get close up to it that you notice any blurriness whatsoever. At the eastern end of Pier 4, Origami Studios have done a really nice job of recreating this wavy concrete wall. South Terminal time now, and where better to start than with the famous rotunda. I think Origami Studios have done an absolutely fantastic job here. It can't be an easy thing to model, and it looks really, really nice. The roof looks great, the piers look really nice. The texture work again doesn't bear super close inspection, but just look how nice it looks from where you would stop your aircraft. Absolutely nothing to complain about there at all. Pier 2 is the only place that I've found so far where I think the texture resolution is really an issue, and that's because of this corrugated material on the front. It does look blurry even from an aircraft cockpit perspective, particularly if you look left towards this jetway structure here. On the positive side, however, the modelling is fantastic, and there is a huge amount of attention to detail here, as there is across the airport. The control tower looks very good indeed. You'll notice it has an animated radar on top, and Origami have done a great job with the modelling and the texture work. Textures are nicely weathered, and these pillars upon which it sits are really nice to look at as well. It is, however, a little bit of a shame that we have default satellite ground imagery around it. The Boeing hangar at the western end of the airport looks pretty good. Nice weathered textures once again. I really like the shadow effect they've used here. And the Virgin Atlantic hangar looks very nice as well. Up near the runway 8 left threshold, we have a pretty convincing recreation of the fire service training area. There are no static aircraft included with this scenery, but there is a huge amount of ground clutter, and the vehicles that they've included look really nice indeed. They're really good high quality models, and the variety is great as well. Let's talk ground textures, and I'm going to say straight off the bat, I'm really impressed by these. iniBuilds have done a fantastic job across the apron of recreating the colours and textures of the real airport, even down to things like the slightly darker areas around stand 568, which according to the Google satellite imagery exist in real life. There's a good amount of rubber marking around the place, and variations in the tone of the slabs. It really does feel very realistic indeed. This taxiway texture as you go under the link bridge is also very accurate to the real thing. There's a little bit of blurriness in the transitions between this and the concrete slabs on either side, but I suspect that is probably a limitation of MSFS. There are one or two slight disappointments here and there though. If you park up on stand 46 for example and look to your right, you'll see some rather blurry ground satellite imagery, and it would have been nice if they had replaced this with something a little sharper. The 3D taxiway signs look good, they're nice and easy to read, and most of the grassy areas look very nice. There is, however, a strange and slightly jarring change in grass colour in between the two runways. I've had a look at the Google and Bing satellite imagery, and this doesn't seem to exist in real life, so I'm not too sure why it's happening in the sim. It is worth bearing in mind, however, that this grass is auto-generated by MSFS, so it may well be that there isn't much that the developer could have done to correct it. The runways look very nice indeed, with accurate markings throughout and really nice realistic looking ground textures, including a good amount of rubber marking around the touchdown zones. The landside areas are nothing really to write home about. There is some good quality modelling in terms of hotels and other buildings around and about the airport entrance, but there's a lot of default satellite imagery over the car parks which looks very blurry, and while there are a few 3D cars parked here and there is a modelled multi-storey car park, it doesn't feel particularly lifelike. Also, out the front of the terminal buildings, we have pretty much nothing, so I don't imagine this is an area that you're going to want to visit particularly often. I'm also slightly disappointed to see no sign of the interterminal shuttle trains. And while we do have some trains on the railway line which serves Gatwick Airport Station here, these appear to be some sort of American commuter trains. This is noticeably different from MKVY's freeware Gatwick, in which he modelled and animated realistic looking southern trains. Here's Origami's Gatwick by night. I'm quite impressed with the apron lighting. That looks fairly realistic, if perhaps a little bit too white. The lamps at the real airport have a slightly warmer yellowy hue to them. But I'm not impressed by the opaque window textures by night. These don't look very convincing at all, in my opinion. They're kind of black and white, there's no colour to them at all, and they look the same across the airport. That said, the one area of the airport which uses transparent glass, i.e. this link bridge here, looks quite nice, and it does have a slight blue tone like the real one does. The taxiway and runway lighting looks very good, and I'm particularly impressed by these red bars across the holding points. Here's Gatwick in the rain, and the ground textures look absolutely fantastic when they're wet. The advantage, of course, of not having too much in the way of transparent glass is that you don't get too much popping with windows sticking out when they should be shrouded in mist. There is a tiny bit on this link bridge over here, but overall the airport looks great. And here we have Gatwick in the snow, and I have to say I'm really impressed with what Origami Studios have achieved here. As we know, Microsoft Flight Simulator does not make snow easy to work with, because the thickness of the snow coverage depends on the colour of the underlying texture. Now this often leads to weird gaps in the snow coverage, patches and really harsh transitions. And while we do have one or two areas that suffer from this, which look like they ought to have a bit of snow on them, they are few and far between. The apron areas look really good, you can still see the cracks between the paving slabs. You've got little areas that aren't as thickly covered as others, which look very realistic, and the runways are more or less free of snow, depending on the thickness you choose. So overall, within the confines of what MSFS allows, I think it looks really very good. So how does Origami Studios Gatwick compare to MKVY's freeware version? Have a look at these comparison shots while I give you my thoughts. Let me start by saying MKVY's Gatwick is one of the best freeware versions of a major airport I've ever seen. Let me continue by saying that, despite a few shortcomings, Origami Studios' product is very good, and certainly the best version of Gatwick I've ever seen in a sim. Here's why it might be worth spending money on this new payware airport. In a nutshell, Origami Studios Gatwick brings you much closer to feeling like you're really there. Compared with MKVY's, it has far better ground texturing, more detailed and more realistic modelling, more convincing building textures, a good amount of weathering, and excellent ground clutter, all contributing to a very believable atmosphere. MKVY's freeware looks a little bit plasticky and a little bit too clean in comparison. Origami Studios have included custom jetways, which make a big difference, but I believe MKVY plans to add these in the future. And here's what I think MKVY has done better, or why you might not want to spend money on the payware version. Firstly, he's included transparent glass. This is a matter of personal taste, I think, but some will prefer pulling up to a terminal and being able to actually see inside, even though the interior modelling in MKVY's Gatwick is limited. Secondly, He's done a much better job on the landside areas, with animated inter-terminal shuttles and realistic southern trains on the Brighton Main Line, as well as slightly better terminal entrances. Thirdly, although they are a bit too clean and shiny, the textures MKVY has used are, in many places, higher resolution. Neither version of Gatwick has particularly great night lighting. MKVY has done better with floodlight colour matching, but his lights are a bit dim and there are some completely dark buildings. Origami Studios have somewhat uninspiring monochrome window textures, but at least all the windows are lit. So should you buy it? Well, really, that's between you and your wallet. It'll depend on the price, I don't currently know how much it will cost, your personal taste, and how rich you're feeling. I hope that this video has given you enough of an insight to make an informed decision though. For what it's worth, having been fortunate enough to receive a free copy of this airport from Origami, I certainly won't be going back to the freeware version. If you'd like to be in with a chance of winning your own free copy of Origami Studios Gatwick, I'll be running a giveaway on my channel on Thursday the 19th of August at 1800 UTC, as I live stream an EasyJet flight from Olbia to Gatwick. I hope you can make it. So that's your lot for today. Let me know in the comments what you think of this airport. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, and thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies. Bye bye.